Who is the stranger that you have only seen meet once in your life that you still think about time to time? I met my husband's doppelganger once. The man looked exactly like my husband. I was with someone at the hospital waiting for their medical transport to pick us up, and I saw who I thought was my husband across the street. My husband was supposed to be at work, so I was confused. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. My patient and I walked over to him, but I stopped short a few feet away because I started to realize maybe it wasn't actually him. His clothes were different and this man was assisting someone in caregiving type role. My husband absolutely would not do that. The guy noticed me staring at him, and so I explained why and even showed him a picture of my husband. He swore that was a picture of him and this was all some practical joke. I had to show him pictures of my husband and I together for him to realize the pictures were not of him. This man could have been his identical twin. I often think of that encounter and how insane it was. I also think of the astronomical chances that not only did my husband have a doppelganger, but that we lived in the same city for a while and I happened to cross paths with him. My husband is friends with his doppelganger. At our wedding everyone assumed they were brothers, despite his actual brother being a groomsman. At the rehearsal dinner I was at the far side of the aisle as my wedding coordinator called out some instructions to the groomsmen at the end of all. I noticed my husband was cutting up with his buddy instead of listening, so I was like, "Husband," in that exasperated voice. I said his actual name, but as soon as it came out of my mouth I realized I was fussing at his friend. His friend didn't notice, but my husband, who was paying attention, sure did. It was very disorienting. I was far enough away for it to be shrugged off. During the wedding one of my little nephews got hurt and went crying to my husband, but it was really his friend. Confusion ensued. He didn't know who this crying child was, but they both figured it out pretty quickly. The adult friend thought it was hilarious. My poor nephew backed away slowly and never spoke of it again. This friend lives far enough away that was the only time we met, but it sure is funny to see photos of them together from when they were younger, before I met my husband, because it can be hard to tell. There are a few giveaways if you know what to look for, but if the photo is poor quality, they look the same. Not a complete stranger but a classmate in my first year at uni. We shared some classes but didn't really spoke to each other beside the casual greetings. One morning she got a call on her cell phone, came back to the classroom visibly upset to gather her things and left. I never saw her again after that. Still think randomly about it sometimes, 14 years later. One day when I was a freshman in college, I sat next to this guy in Oakham who looked between 30 and 50 years old. He listened intently to the lecture, took copious notes, and even recorded the lecture. After the first midterm, I sat next to him again when they were handing back our tests. He gets his and just stared at the pages. I tried not to peek at his score, but I could see a great deal of red ink. Suddenly, I notice a big fat tear fall on his test and his shoulders kind of go up and down. After class he pulled me aside and asked me how I did so well on the test. We then went to a cafe and he told me his life story. Ever since he was young he wanted to be a mortician. He had completed all of the requirements except for organic chemistry. This was his third and last attempt. If he didn't pass he would still graduate but not be able to be a mortician. I offered to help him because I couldn't believe how he could be so confused when it came so easily to me. Every day for the rest of the semester we spent 1 or 2 hours studying Ochem together, and 1 or 2 Sundays we spent all day together. He even offered to pay me for my time, but I told him it was unnecessary because I was getting a lot out of it because explaining things to him solidified the concepts for me. He ended up passing the class. The second semester we didn't study together, but by then he had figured the subject out and could do it on his own. Stan, if you're out there, I hope you achieved your dream. 1986. A year after graduating from a tiny college in Idaho, I was at Disneyland with a high school buddy. I was totally convinced that I saw a college friend, Adam, in line at Pirates of the Caribbean. I kept waving at him, but he looked at me like I was out of my mind. My high school friend tried to talk me down, saying that Adam clearly had no idea who I was. It's not him. Everyone has a twin. Yada, yada, yada. The line finally snakes around to where I am standing right next to Adam, so I tap him on the shoulder and ask, "Hey, aren't you Adam M?" And he says, "No, I'm his twin brother Aaron." 34 years later and I still tell that story at parties. I only met Aaron once, in 1986, in line at Pirates, but I do wish him, and Adam, a very happy birthday on Facebook. Once I was walking to work past a homeless shelter pickup spot. It was a sunny day, middle of summer. A small lady was standing on the sidewalk wearing rain boots, a yellow raincoat, and wrapped completely in a blue vinyl tarp. As I walked by her, she leaned into me, looked me in the eye and said, "Fish monster." I still think about her. Did she think I was a fish monster? Was she concerned that I had seen a fish monster? Perhaps she felt I was unprepared, and her questioning tone was more about if I'd heard about the potential of fish monsters. Such a surreally complex interaction in just 2 words. One thing I know for certain is that whatever the fish monster status was, she was clearly the best prepared of everyone present. When I was fresh out of college, I drove over 2 hours away for a job interview and got into a car accident like a block away from the building. My car was completely totaled. A woman who was stopped at the stop sign near my accident pulled over and got out to make sure I was okay. I was completely fine physically but have very bad anxiety and immediately had a panic attack. I was sobbing and couldn't catch my breath, and this complete stranger sat with me the entire time, telling me to breathe and just being so caring and supportive. She waited with me for the police to come. She helped me talk them through what happened. She called my mom for me. She even called the office I was on my way to so she could let them know about the accident and that I would call them to reschedule my interview. As if that wasn't enough, once she found out that I was that far away from home and it was going to take my mom 2 hours to get to me, she canceled her meeting that she was already late to so she could drive me halfway. She did not think it was a big deal whatsoever. She just stepped up to the plate to help without question. I would have been completely alone and lost without her that day. She was an angel, honestly. I lost her business card between all the paperwork from the accident and I've been kicking myself over it for the last 5 years. All I want is to call her and tell her how thankful I am and that I've kept her in my thoughts ever since. Roxanne, if you're out there, thank you so much, and please for the love of God send me your last name so I can send you some flowers. An old lady who lived next door to me and had a key from the past renter. She walked into my place and made us breakfast thinking I was the same lady who lived there previously. She didn't realize I was a different person. We talked about her grandson joining the police academy and she was worried but proud of him. She died that night. When I was a kid, I flew by myself for the first time. At the airport, when I was about to check in, I spotted an elderly lady looking at me deeply. At first I thought I accidentally hit her or something, so I asked if she needed anything. She nodded. Didn't give it much importance, so I just checked in and headed to my plane. Later, already on the plane, I see the very same lady, looking for her seat. Of course I helped her and asked her what number her seat was. She handed me her ticket. B37. I'll never forget it because I was the C37. She sat right next to me. I was scared. I was a kid, and I wasn't used to coincidences. Anyway, long flight. When we arrived and were waiting for the plane to land for us to head out, she finally says, "You know, you really look like my daughter." I even thought you were her. But she passed away 5 years ago, silly me. Here, this is her with my grandkids. She handed me her phone with a zoomed-in picture. I was paralyzed when I saw her. She looked exactly like me. But she was 28 and I was 10. I couldn't even talk. Now that I am older, every time I look in the mirror for my birthday, I remember that lady and the picture. I am a living photo of her daughter. Every year that goes by is a year that I look more like that woman in the picture. When I turn 28, I hope this memory will finally scare me less. I was having a rough day and I thought I'd get an ice cream to cheer myself up. I was standing in the line and this old lady looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and just had a rough day. I got up to the front to get my ice cream and she tells the cashier, "I've got this young man, he's had a rough day." She smiles at me and says, "Enjoy your ice cream." I still think of her whenever I have a rough day. I send her my good vibes. I was doing last-minute Father's Day shopping with my son for my husband. There was a young lady in the card section crying. Full-on, broken-hearted ugly crying. I looked at her and thought, poor thing, I hope she's okay. We finished our shopping, lined up to check out and she was still there. She's pick up a card, look at it, burst into fresh tears, put it back, then compose herself and lose it all over again. By now my heart was breaking for her, so I sent my son off to grab a box of chocolates. We bought our stuff and waited just outside for her. When she came out I grabbed the chocks, approached her and said, "I don't know what's going on and it's none of my business, but I got these for you. I promise things will get better." She burst into tears, grabbed me in a hug and said, "My dad died 2 days ago." Anyway, longish story short, we sat down and she told me about her dad and how she wanted to put a Father's Day card in his coffin with the present she'd gotten him and all the things people need to say when someone they love dies suddenly. We went our separate ways when she saw how late it was, and honestly, to this day I don't know if I'd recognize her even if I bumped into her again. But I've always wondered how she made it through her first Father's Day without her dad and how she's doing now. I was on my way back from Disneyland Paris, sat in the airport and a guy beside me was typing away on his laptop. A little curious at what he was writing, I peeked over and saw the title, "The Last Letter I'll Ever Write." I was frozen for a few minutes. I'm 24 and I had absolutely no idea what to do. I thought maybe he was a writer and if I ask he'll look stupid. Eventually no, I turned round to him and said, "Look man, I really hope I'm making a fool of myself, but are you okay?" Turns out he and his long-term partner had broken up, and they were meant to be coming on this holiday that he'd now come on with his dad. He blamed himself, and he'd been going to therapy for a while to get out of a pretty dark place. But some days were better than others, and writing the letters was an exercise from his therapist. We chatted for a bit, about her, his dad, me, life in general. Turned out his brother lived nearby me and frequented a coffee shop right by where I used to live. Eventually my plane got called, and we hugged and I told him I really hope things get better for him and that at the very least I'd had a lovely time talking to him. We left there and I still wonder what happened to him. I hope he's happy now. I hope that he's managed to find some good in the world again. But I guess I'll never know for sure.